We have just heard in the reading from Exodus that the Lord had dictated to Moses and Aaron very detailed and meticulous rules that would become laws that the children of Israel were to follow for their protection as well as preparation for their deliverance and journey into a new world and a new life beyond slavery and bondage in Egypt. Moreover, the Lord had decreed a festival to celebrate not just the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, but a day that would mark the Lord's covenant with them. The festival of Passover in Jerusalem, the city of the King, was a time to celebrate and acknowledge God's love for his people and the covenant God had established with them. Obedience to God's law was not only acknowledgement of the covenant, but expression of their love for God. Jesus would bring a very different interpretation of God's commandment as he journeyed to Jerusalem. At Passover, the population of Jerusalem expanded enormously as Jews from across Palestine traveled to the city. Josephus estimated the population of the city may have swelled to more than 1 million. As the population of the city suddenly expanded, so too did the potential for unrest. The Roman authorities nervously watched while the soldiers at the Antonia fortress were ready to respond with their customary brutality to put down any sign of civil unrest. Moreover, 4 principal Jewish sects, the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Zealots, were all vying for recognition and dominance. Add to this the temple aristocracy, who were well aware that throughout Jesus' ministry, his miracles and teachings had been a direct challenge to the law of Moses. Crowds had laid down palms to welcome him as he made his way into the city on a donkey. The Sadducees and the Pharisees worried that he was being greeted as the hoped-for Messiah, a warrior such as David, who would free them from Roman bondage. But it had been prophesied that the king would be coming to them humble and mounted on a donkey. Jerusalem was a powder keg with multiple fuses ready to be lit. Jesus would have been very aware of the tension and the danger in the city, and he spoke often of the fate that awaited him: arrest, trial, crucifixion, and ultimate resurrection. Yet his attention was on the upper room, where a farewell meal had been prepared for him and his disciples. At the dinner, Jesus left the table, knelt down before his disciples, removed their sandals, and began washing their feet. It was an act of supreme humility, a gift as unexpected as it was unorthodox, a gift of unconditional love that astonished his disciples, but an act that Jesus knew they would not understand until much later. The washing of the feet in that era was a sign of hospitality and generosity, typically performed by a servant, but never the master of the house. The disciples often referred to Jesus as rabbi, teacher, or Lord, but he now served them as a servant might his master. The 180-degree turn Jesus had just made was too much for Peter, who attempted to instruct Jesus by saying, "You will never wash my feet." In that very intimate moment of Jesus kneeling before Peter, Peter was unable to comprehend Jesus' gift of hospitality, attention, and generosity. Simone Weil, a mid-20th century French activist and theologian, has written, Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. The attention she describes requires kenosis, a self-emptying, unfettered by self-interest and ego. She would say that it is not only that intimate moment that true recognition of and love for the other is possible. I think this is the gift that Peter and the disciples were unable to comprehend. Jesus' demonstration to them of unconditional love through servanthood. I remember the first Maundy Thursday service I attended here at Good Sam. Then foot washing for me was simply not an option. I was able to use the pretense of modesty to cover a sense of vulnerability that I was unwilling to risk. The second year, I came prepared. Loafers and no socks. Loafers, I might say, not unlike sandals, are very sensible shoes to wear to a foot washing. Without knowing why, I was willing to risk what in the previous year I had so carefully avoided. I knelt and began washing the feet of a parishioner. Afterwards, I remember asking myself, what just happened here? Like the disciples, something had occurred in that simple act of generosity that I could not name. It was only much later that I began to understand the richness of that moment. Simone Weil would describe it as the expression of compassion and gratitude that happens in a flash between two human beings. A bond was established between the parishioner and myself. Just as I served the parishioner, so too the parishioner served me. I never imagined it to be such an intimate, grace-filled experience. In that all too brief moment, empty of all pride and pretense, there was the experience of generosity and Christian love for the other. I think the Spirit might have been saying to me, cherish this moment. There is much for you to learn here. I think Jesus' act of generosity and compassion for his disciples serves as a model for us. The act of self-emptying when we can truly experience and see the other, not based on our assessment of whether the other is worthy of our love, but believing that all are worthy of God's love. Jesus' love for Peter and his disciples was unconditional, despite how often their faith was flawed and tenuous. There are those times in our lives, moments that are perhaps not well understood, but as we reflect on them, new meaning begins to emerge. Such is the case as I pondered the experience with the parishioner. Embedded in the memory of that event was the revelation of the beautiful gift of serving and being served. As I began to find my way into the new commandment Jesus offered his disciples, just as I have loved you, you also must love one another. May we all find our own joy in honoring Jesus' commandment as we love and serve one another. Amen.